Hello, everyone. Susan Winter here, best-selling author and relationship expert, and I have a surprise for you today. You may notice there's somebody else with me. I'm having a conversation with the incredible, the amazing, my colleague, Jonathon Aslay, leading midlife coach and relationship expert for people over 40 who want loving, committed, healthy relationships. And today, we're having a conversation about communication, but specifically sexual preferences. Now, I don't normally talk about this, so this is a great opportunity to introduce Jonathon, get his input because we have to learn how to have these difficult conversations, and he's going to help us to know how and when to say this stuff. Jonathon, welcome, my dear. How are
Oh, I'm
you?
so happy to be here, Susan. You're one of my all-time favorites, and I'm honored to be one of
Oh,
your first guests on you doing
you're my
interviews. So thank you so
first.
much.
You're my first. And
Oh
Jonathon,
my God, you're a virgin with me. Oh my God, I dig it.
this is amazing. Yes, I am a virgin. And you know what they say? You never forget your first. So thank you, Jonathan.
I'm well, I'm your first, I guess, so I hope you never forget it.
Oh,
Uh,
that's right.
and I'm excited to be talking about this because, sex is so taboo on so many different levels. And so I'm really, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with you.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, so here's what I want to know. You did a video recently on this and you went into quite a lot of detail. You even had a contract. Let's begin at the beginning. Why is it so important, especially now, in your mind?
Well, okay, so I do have something known as my dating vows, which is agreements people make, particularly right around the time that they're going to explore physical intimacy, because I believe the minute we get emotionally and physically connected with another person, even kissing is a rather emotionally intimate act. We can form attachments with people. So sadly, dating today is so cavalier, so
Yes,
trivial,
right.
so ambivalent, lacking intention that I'm here to encourage a more radically honest way of approaching relationship. And my dating vows is just one of many of conversations I'm hoping couples will have, particularly before they have physical intimacy. And if you're interested, I'm willing to share the vows with
Oh,
you.
absolutely, because this is clearly not something that you want to start discussing afterwards. I mean, it's so much better to set it up in the beginning. And you were also talking about preferences, like if you're a guy looking for romance, there may be certain things that you didn't experience in your last relationship that you want to hear, or you may have certain desires that are very specific that are definitely somebody has to know up front to make sure that you should even bother to meet each other. So let's start with what you think you would like to share with us as far as the conversations and the specifics, because I think it's quite
So,
brilliant.
okay, and you said something key there. I want to touch upon romance, because we are talking about romantic relationships. In other words, we're not talking about, you know, family relationships, brothers, sisters, parents, that sort of thing. We're not talking about work relationships. We're not talking about friend relationships. What makes romantic relationships unique, for the most part, and this isn't always the case, is the physical intimacy. So one of the things I have, I'll make sure everyone gets this link, is something known as my dating vows, and I'm going to read it to you, okay?
Okay, super.
And it's right here, my
Got
my
it.
notes, and I actually, the title of this video I once did was "Get Him to Commit Before Sleeping Together." And Susan, have you ever heard the saying, "Women are the gatekeepers of sex, and men are the gatekeepers of commitment"?
I haven't heard it quite like that. I've heard that women have all the power until you sleep with them, then it shifts dramatically, right?
I can't remember, yes, and I can't remember who said the gatekeepers of commitment and sex, but to some degree, it used to be in the past, before two people had physical intimacy, a man would have to commit by giving a ring and getting married.
Oh,
That certainly has changed. So
absolutely.
my dating vows is an agreement two people make prior to physical intimacy, and it goes like this. You state your name. So I agree to explore the process of getting to know you with the intent to declare something serious within 3 to 6 months. Now, when I say serious, I don't mean marriage or
Yeah, yeah,
living
yeah.
together. I just mean that this is something real versus ambiguous, casual situationships, friends with benefits, or hooking up. So, first is agreeing that if we're going to do this, that we're doing it with some intent. Number
So you are
two,
establishing intentionality as with the end goal of being something meaningful, not just a fling. I love it.
exactly,
Love it.
exactly.
Okay, cool. All right.
I'd like to talk about that even from my own personal preferences to illustrate a point.
Okay.
Number two, I agree to be monogamous sexually while we are having regular sex together.
Woo!
Now,
That's
so okay, now here's the deal. You can have sex with someone the first time and never see him again. There's no need
right,
for monogamy
right, right, right.
because it's sex once. But if you're going to have regular sex, then you're making agreements to one another. And for women who oftentimes struggle with this, and I say this because I hear this from my
Yeah,
female clientele is I look, say you simply can say, look, I'm monogamous when I have regular sex with someone. How do you operate?
I love
You
it.
know, but
No,
this is
perfect.
taking it deeper by saying
Yeah,
these are agreements.
yeah, yeah.
Number three,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Now, again, if you're having regular sex together, you're making an agreement to not actively seek to meet and date others while you're in the dating process, including taking down your dating profiles.
That's another one. You know how upset gals are when they say, we've been sleeping together for 3 months. I thought I had something with him, and I saw him. My friend saw him on a dating app. Oh, that's just really, really good, Jonathan. Very nice.
It's interesting. I have a dear friend who was in a relationship that eventually is now he's engaged to be married to her, but he still was kind of addicted to the swiping on the dating profile months and months into the relationship. And when I called him on it, I go, how would she feel if she knew about this? And he goes, well, she wouldn't feel so good. And he recognized that it was almost an addictive quality that caused him to just swipe because their relationship hadn't built the deep roots of trust. So
Ah,
I'm a believer that if two people are having physical
yeah,
intimacy, take a break.
yeah,
You don't
yeah,
need to be on there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
you can't really multitask in this selection process. I don't think that you get a really good, a nibble here, a nibble there. You're not focusing your energy to really get a quality experience to be able to make that decision whether you continue to see them because you're too diffused, don't you think?
I am so in agreement. I struggle. I date one person at a time.
I
Now,
do
let me
too.
be clear.
Yeah,
To me, man, just so you understand my terminology of dating, since most of the time it's a stranger, the first time we meet is a meeting. Okay,
yeah.
it's not a date in my world.
Okay,
The second time we meet, it's a follow-up meeting because you just want to make sure what you saw the first time corresponds with the second
okay,
time. The
got it.
third time you meet is the first date. And if you
Oh,
decide, so this is my
okay.
methodology.
Interesting. Okay,
And
okay,
by the time you see each other 4 times, you're exploring dating with one another. In other words, if after the second date, which is the fourth meeting,
yeah.
you agree you want to spend time together, then you're basically beginning exploring a relationship because what is dating? It's a vetting process to determine if you want a relationship with this person. And so I treat the first two times you see each other as meetings because we
Okay.
put too much pressure on a date. There's so
Yeah.
much
No.
expectations. And make it simpler on each other. Hey, we're two
Yeah,
people
yeah.
meeting. We have no idea what's going to happen. Let's take the pressure off. No expectations from either one. So there's no harm, no foul if it doesn't go anywhere.
I love this. So far we've covered three. Is there anything
Okay.
else after this?
So there's more. So again,
Okay.
taking off the dating profile, if you're having regular sex, number four, I agree to speak up if this isn't working for me versus
Love it.
pulling back,
Love it.
ghosting, or disappearing.
Love
I'm
it.
agreeing that if this doesn't work, I'm not going to pull back, ghost, and disappear. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Jonathan, I love it. I always tell my followers I have an honesty conversation I do in the very beginning. I make it a little bit more flip. Yours is very structured. It's beautiful. I'm sure that there are many different ways that you can say it, but I have one of those in the first meeting, okay, when the sniffing, the beginning,
Yeah, the sniff
it's
test.
the sniff test. You know, Listen, I believe in honesty. So here's my thing. If this doesn't work, it's not working for me. I'm just going to say it. I want you to know that I'm comfortable doing that. And please be honest with me. We're just meeting each other. I'd rather have the truth. Are you cool with that? That way they don't have to play that ghosting game. But very nice structure. Okay.
And the last one of the agreements
Okay.
is I agree to invest regular time in the process of getting to know you, which looks like the following. So, I'm going to share with you what I seek in a relationship as an example of the commitment I would make to someone. So, I always say, I'm looking for a relationship where we spend 3 or 4 days and nights a week together, doing shared activities, hobbies, mutual interests, spending time with family and friends, traveling together, teamwork, building skills, both in our personal and our professional life, intimacy, both physical and emotional intimacy that leads to either moving in together or getting married. I am crystal clear that I want a life partner. I'm not looking to date for a short term
Yeah.
gratification. I'm very intentional. Now, sadly, the majority of people in the dating marketplace are operating very ambiguously. So, my dating vows is designed to
Mm-hmm.
cut through the bull. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
want to be upfront with you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly work with women.
But
I
you're
would venture,
expanding into men. I know that that's a
yeah,
new
I'm expanding
category.
to men, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
would venture to say if a woman presents this to a man, a significant percentage of men will be like, I don't need to agree to this because there's a significant percentage of women that
Like
have no,
95% will go, oh my God, she's over the top. I know.
yeah,
Well, so this is my second question. So,
okay.
like, how you just explained the material. When do you have this conversation?
I think well, first off, can I, before the penis goes inside the vagina, I think it'd
True,
be a
true,
good
true,
time to
true.
have that
Oh, true, true, true.
conversation.
So there's the
So
sniffing date number one. There's kind
yeah,
of reaffirming that I liked what I thought I saw. An official date is the third time of meeting. At what point might you present this?
here's the thing. You can have a conversation about it without making the agreements. I've created this so it can be a conversation
Oh,
starter,
yeah. Oh,
something you could actually talk about on a first, second, or third date, not necessarily make agreements to it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it
Okay.
can be a tremendous conversation starter, number one. Certainly, by the time you begin to have feelings for someone, the time you start to become a little bit attached, the time you agree to spend regular time together, my suggestion is certainly before you're physically intimate. That would be the, because you don't want to do this after the fact. You
No,
want to
you
have these
can't.
agreements ahead of
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
So, and today, most people are having sex between the third and 10th date. So, somewhere between 3 and 10.
So, Jonathan, this sounds more like a dating contract. What about a sexual preferences contract or discussion? When does
I
that come up?
I love this conversation. So I think when two people, and this is the tricky part, because you see, dating for the most part has always been driven by romance and entertainment. I'm going to repeat myself, romance and entertainment. There is this predominant, and it's led by chemistry. In other words, when there is that chemistry attraction, people then hyper focus on romance and entertainment. In other words, going out to dinners, men are planning and playing for dates, all this kind of stuff. It's all centered around romance.
Yes.
It's not really, most dating experiences aren't really centered around determining compatibility. Okay. And sexual preferences is one of the components for compatibility. And yet it's the most taboo conversation. And it's not just ambivalent, but there's almost this grand expectation that if you have great chemistry, the sex should just be off the charts. And God forbid the guy
Right.
has ED that night, because he forgot to take a blue pill. And all of a sudden, there's a judgment around his sexual performance. So there's a judgment on her sexual performance because they're going in kind of ambivalent versus intentional.
But you know what's nice? If you had the dating contract conversation first, you
Yeah.
could then more easily weave in the preferences because now there is a safety net. There is the understanding that this is not cavalier. My intention is not just one and done. I'm actually trying to build something here. And so, by the way, as a part of this information, maybe we need to talk about this. If the sexual preferences came specifically, first and foremost, in an online chat, I'd be like, what? Now, I have a
Yeah.
friend that likes that because she's all about playtime. If a guy came on to me too much in the beginning, I don't even know him. I don't know what I don't even, he's not even giving me the setup. But now he wants to talk about, I need this and I need that. I'm like, so turned off. So it seems like first is the why I am seeing, why I'm dating, and
Yeah.
what I am going to be able to, what my intention is to do with you if this is, if we're compatible. And then
Yeah.
the sexual component is the conversations, the very tricky conversation over what is a compatible romantic life, right? But it's,
It's interesting. I hear as a coach for women, you know, they freely share with me because we're in this container
yeah,
of, of transparency, of vulnerability, authenticity, honesty, and such. And I've had women share with me some of their, issues around sex. And when I use the word issues, I don't mean it in that, but their reservations, their hangups. I mean, whatever it is,
right,
whatever gives them pause or
yeah,
resistance. And I was speaking to one client. She said, "Look, I'm not into giving or receiving oral sex." And she was dating a guy, and like that's his favorite thing to do. And all of a sudden, they were beginning to get closer and closer, and she didn't share this with him. And it ended up effectively being his deal breaker because
yeah,
that was important to him. And I'm like, God, I mean, I guess the question is, would you want to even know that before you meet someone for the first time? I don't think we do that, but like these are really important conversations
I
to if
know.
two people have that sniff test and like each other, then the sooner the better in my book.
So here's another thing about women, and I'm sure you know this.
Yeah.
When a woman feels safe and comfortable and trusts her partner is there,
Yeah.
what she formerly would have said no to without a safety net, she can be a whole different animal with the person she trusts because she knows he's with her, he's committed to her, and she can do things with him only because the freedom is given through the attachment and the security of that relationship.
Yeah, but well, and I'm by the way, I'm in full agreement. I'm in absolute agreement. But like for the example of the client that I spoke of, look what ended up happening. It's
Okay,
a these are kind of the I'm really this is the rub
but
because
how's a guy?
she didn't say to him, well, that might change. She said, this is my standard.
So
And it ended up being a deal breaker in this particular
so she
case.
knew this is absolutely never happening for her. And
Yeah, it's just not her, not her forte. And it was kind of interesting because I mean, you know, it's sometimes uncomfortable to talk about these things, even as the coach and the
oh
confidant
yeah,
and everything,
right.
because I don't want to actually have any judgments or anything, but what they do is they practice with me so we can
Yeah.
have these conversations. So it helps build that muscle because that's really what we're talking about is overcoming the fear of having those really uncomfortable conversations sooner rather than later. But I'm in agreement. When two people feel safe with each other,
Mhm.
by the way, I know men who have a hard time ejaculating until they feel emotionally safe with a woman. So,
Yeah.
like that comes up too. And I've spoken to men about this.
Wow. Okay. So there's so much here. I I think we've come to a time period where we must be honest because we just have to cut through the confusion and people can't take the emotional whiplash of one more failed relationship for something they didn't see coming. So I'm all in agreement with honesty and being forthcoming. It is a challenge for some people to have these conversations. And you and I can lay this out as best we like. If we can help our clients and we can do text message, say this, say that, but they're still going to have the challenge of having to do it. So don't you feel that a lot of this has to be, there's some essentials in the first few meetings, like intentionality, and then there are some refinements that come along where we're going to have to curiously step onto ice and see how far
Yeah.
we can walk, right? And make
So
it safe.
I think, we're in the year of 2025. I believe that we're going to begin a paradigm shift in dating
Mhm.
from the way it's been for the last decade and a half, particularly for online dating or swipe dating. And let me
Oh,
tell you what I
what?
think it is.
Detail. Yeah.
You know what? Because of what you just said, all of these starts and stops emotionally, connecting with someone and not working out, I think there's a gigantic burnout. And I think it
Yes,
starts by first getting crystal clear on what you want. And
absolutely.
because ambiguity is a killer
Yep.
to trust and safety. But more importantly, it's not just knowing what you want, but knowing thyself. In other words, doing inner work, doing personal development, self help, spiritual work to know your negative patterns, your limiting beliefs, your fears and insecurities, particularly in the area of relationships. For example, knowing your love attachment style
Right.
would be radically important to
Right.
help somebody build a relationship if you know how you operate in relationship. And so I believe first, I think we're seeing a shift in in the human pair bonding is people are beginning to do therapy, understand
Yes.
who they are,
Right.
but most importantly, what is it that you want and what is your motive? I think it's important to declare that right from the get-go.
Oh, I love
So if
this.
it's
Jonathan, what do you say to all those people that are advising women to like, oh, be mysterious. Don't let him know. I mean, you and I think are advocates for honesty, and
yeah.
no game playing, but there's just as many people on the other side that want you to be mysterious and difficult and alluring and never tell him any. I mean, I don't know.
So
They get relationships, but I think they got to get game. I don't think they can get real.
so here's the thing about mystery. I would venture to say it takes a lifetime to actually get to know another human being fully. Okay. You can share so much on the first date, and there's a tremendous voluminous amount more beyond if you just shared nonstop for 3 hours type of thing. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
just saying
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
so much more to a person than what we can actually articulate in a short period of time. Just for that whole and the mystery thing is dangerous. It is radically dangerous because what it is you're hiding who you are
Agree.
instead of revealing who you are. By the way, now Susan, you're not going to like this terminology, but I'm going to say it anyway. Dating is an interrogation process. But now let me tell you why I say this, okay?
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, you're just saying what's real.
Okay. So what
Elegantly
does
done. It's a
yeah,
filtering process
yeah,
for a candidate.
what is the purpose of interrogation is to get to the truth. That's the
Yeah.
whole goal of
Yeah.
why a detective sits with a suspected criminal. We want to get to the truth, so we're going to interrogate you. Now it doesn't seem very romantic, it's not very fun, it's not very sexy, because as I said earlier, we have been indoctrinated in this romance entertainment way of getting to know one another, and we don't find out for weeks if not months who this person is, only to
Right.
find that we're attached to a person who's completely misaligned with us.
Yeah.
I'm here to say, and now I use the word interrogation a little tongue in cheek, okay? But what it means is what I encourage in my coaching is something I call radical honesty, pre-qualifying your prospect. I ask the tough questions right from the very beginning because I don't want to meet you
I do
if
too.
we're not a fit. Like what's
I
and by the way, and I can tell you, I'm as a single man out in the marketplace,
Oh, yeah.
women are resistant of this. They're like, well, let's just like there's an interesting dichotomy going on.
But
Men are
they're not
resistant.
comfortable with you. They're not comfortable with their own honesty. Otherwise, they'd flip it right back at
Exactly.
you. You know that they don't know themselves. They're more concerned that you're going to want them than for them to be real and tell you the truth. Because if they told you the truth, you may not want them, but they don't have the confidence to say, well, then we're not right for each other next. Right?
Yeah. I believe we should be able to fall in love with a person's inner 6-year-old. The things we don't like a person, that's where the juicy meat of a relationship exists. It's not in the as Chris Rock, the ambassador of our best selves. It's in the picadillos, as Robin Williams said in Good Will Hunting. That's where the juice of a relationship is. So share your insecurities, and I'm
Yeah.
saying this a little tongue
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
cheek. But you know what? not to suggest lead with it, but we all have fears and insecurities. And if we can embrace that, we actually build intimacy with another person.
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
build trust
Yeah.
through that versus the facade most humans are operating in.
God, there's so much posturing in who we think we have to be with all this stuff. And there are far too many coaches that are advocating that as a style of attraction. It's so irritating. Well, this is why, well,
Well,
this,
you and I operate from a um, human behavior perspective. We
exactly.
operate from a therapy
Yeah.
perspective in the
Yep.
sense that we operate as coaches. We see it from a therapeutic point of view, not a manipulative point of view.
Acquisition based.
It's
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly,
Mhm.
acquisition based. So this
Yeah.
is where you and I as coaches differ than a lot of people out there.
Well, we're trying to help people with an end goal of a loving, committed, healthy relationship. It's completely different if you want playtime. I have a friend who got divorced after 25
Yeah,
years and she wanted playtime, very specific about what she wanted. And if
yeah.
she didn't see equipment she wanted and she didn't see a person that wanted how she wanted, she just was no. So I think we are, because since I knew that we would be having this conversation, I have asked a couple of people how they feel about this and what they say and what they don't say.
Yeah.
Granted, it is a challenging conversation for many, but I do find that I agree, we are moving more toward honesty, if only because people are exhausted with not having it.
Exactly. And I want to bring it back to the sex conversation because I
Okay.
think you might find
Okay.
this interesting.
Okay.
So recently I connected with a Ivy League anthropologist who is also a sex educator,
Wow.
particularly in the arena of kink. Now,
Wow.
there's a
Okay.
there's a
Very
connotation.
important. Yep.
Okay, so it's interesting because within the, for lack of a better word, the kink world, and
Yep.
there's this negative connotation around it, but it's just basically kink represents your sexual preferences. That's all that word means is
Right.
this is my sex. Now, some people are BDSM, some are
Yep.
slaves, some are this,
Yep.
some are that, some are dominant, some are submissive. There's
Right.
all these different things. But what's interesting in the kink world, people that meet through these mediums, their first date is to discuss what their preferences are.
Bingo.
But
And
they don't
contracts.
have sex. They
No.
don't have sex. They just go, okay, what's your preference? Well, I'm a submissive, you're a
Yep.
dominant. I
Yep.
like this, you like that.
Yep.
And then they come up with agreements, as you said,
I agree.
contract. And it's very upfront.
Yes.
And by the way, in many cases, these sexual encounters turn into relationships later on down the road. Now, I'm not advocating for a sex-based way of dating. That's not what I'm advocating. But what I appreciate, what she shared with me, is that they have a conversation about their sexual preferences. And kink is sexual preferences, and fetishes are the sensations you want to experience within those
Mm.
sexual preferences, like whether you have a foot fetish, whether you have an elbow
Mm.
fetish, whether you have a back of the head fetish, whatever it is, it's
Right.
the physical sensation associated with the preference. This is something I just learned. I had no idea about this for years, and I'm
Oh,
just learning about it.
you will love this. I have BDSM clients, and
Okay.
one thing that you might hear this even in the old videos, the structure and the protocol and the agreements are contractual. They are exceedingly specific. One thing I truly admire about this community in its purest form,
Yeah.
it's not like somebody watched 50 Shades of Grey and wants to put a cigarette out on your back. They
Yeah.
are they are clean and sober. There is no alcohol or drug usage during BDSM because you might not be clued into what your partner is doing because it is the ultimate form of trust. Now, it's not my design.
Yeah.
I had a guy who wanted me to stick him in a dog cage and polish my shoes. So I gave him to my girlfriend because she had a horse farm and she had a bunch of saddles and boots. And she goes, I'll stick him in a cage and I'll beat him. I pawned him off. But the thing is, I respect the structure and the format because there's nothing worse than some latest kink getting exposed in some of our online magazines and everybody wants to jump on board and try it with
Yeah.
some unwitting partner that they picked up in a bar that night who doesn't know what the boundaries are, doesn't know how to express
Yeah.
themselves. And now they're in the middle of a boundary issue and they're trying so hard to be cool and think that, well, because this is in the open, I need to be modern about it. While these very specific things, like I answered a personal ad years ago for a man who wanted a calm person. And I set him up
Okay.
with the girl with the horse farm. He was a British wealthy guy, bought 75 acres of land, and it was gorgeous. And I put them together. She wouldn't answer the ad I did. As it turns out, they were perfect on paper, but in the bedroom, he was king. And she said to me, Susan, I drink myself nearly crazy every night. I can't do it. I can't. He's got everything I want. And calm, I reprimanded him. I said, calm is not the same as submissive. You didn't, this is
Yeah.
really
What is the
important.
difference between calm and submissive? I'd like
He
to
did,
know.
he didn't have the courage to say it because here's where they get greedy. They don't
Okay.
want to tell you what their kink is, what their absolute center point of their sexual preference. So what they do is they let somebody walk in, fall in love with everything else that they are going to give them, and
Okay.
then hope that they can morph this person into being compliant instead of taking a bunch of no's from people that don't want it and finding the person who goes, oh, yeah, I think that's kind of hot.
Yeah, exactly.
He ended up losing an engagement
By
ring.
the way,
God knows what else, you know?
you mentioned 50 Shades of Grey. If I remember the movie correctly, I didn't read the books, but didn't he give her a 14-page contract? I mean, line by line, and she read line by line by line by line, and she checked off the things that she had question
You
marks on, and they had a conversation with one another.
you have to do that in the real world. And I don't remember. That's very no, listen, I had somebody who was showing me her contract that she had. She was a lesbian with her partner as to what she likes, how far you can cut, how far you can't cut. It's incredibly specific. And my friends who are DOMs in the business say
Yeah.
to me that for them, it is the ultimate form of testimony of love because of the surrender and
Yeah.
the attachment and the trust. I can't imagine for me anything worse. But I have to respect any modality that is honest, has structure around it, and is
Yeah.
mutually clearly understood, and the rules are followed.
Oh
Now,
my God. I have to jump in because I love what you just said. And this is what I've observed. And again, I work with women, but this is going to sound like a criticism, so please forgive me. But so often they operate, well, if we love each other, magic fairy dust will make all of this ambiguity work out. And what we're differentiating between ambiguity and clarity.
I know.
And love is a radically ambiguous thing
I love this.
to some degree. It's not, it's just a feeling. It's certainly an opportunity to be a giver and to be, committed and all those things. But ultimately, we're talking about a relationship. And a relationship in and of itself is a separate entity. And let's hope that love is a part of that entity, but the understanding the other person's needs, wants, and desires. Let me reframe that. Two people mutually wanting to understand each other's needs, wants, and desires, and saying, hey, I want to meet those needs.
Right.
Like, instead of like, well, let me just be afraid to talk about it because, or I don't feel safe to talk about it. Like this is the time to be radically open before you get attached.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because
Absolutely.
once like, how many clients do you counsel? They're radically attached to a person. It's a complete train wreck, but it doesn't matter because they're attached.
They wouldn't book a session if they weren't already there. Like nobody calls me and just pays me to say, hey, I'm doing well. How are you? Right.
Well, but our goal, and one of the reasons why you and I are beating the drum, beating the drum, beating the drum with our videos is to encourage, honest, open,
Right.
authentic, transparent communication. Because, and here's the fantasy, no disrespect, but people think, oh, I know how to communicate. No, you don't, because there's duct tape over lots of your mouths,
Right. Right.
and
And they're so afraid that if I tell
that's what
you what I want and need, then you're going to reject me. I think it's a
Yeah.
fear of rejection, don't you think?
Mm. So I just coincidentally, I last night had a conversation with a woman that I connected through a dating site. And I had a very, we didn't talk about physical intimacy, but I talked about the other things that are important to me in my life. And it was interesting. She goes, she even kind of intimated this feels like an interview. And I go, yes, it is. Like I'm not going to invest my time if we're misaligned. And sure enough, we got to a point where there was something where we were radically misaligned and the conversation ended. There was no need to move forward. And listen, I don't need to go through the practice of let's get together, have a good time, get together, have a good time, get together, have a good time to find out that this is our deal breaker. I'm encouraging radically honest conversations from the get go. And then when you meet, it can be about fun.
Right. Well, imagine how that would cure dating burnout. I think you mentioned that earlier, that we're all so disenchanted because people go down the emotional attachment tract only to discover it backfires, right? So that's like I think my keyword last year was filter, filter, filter. Like
Yeah.
it's incumbent upon us to filter the candidates that are even worth our time. But some people are so lonely, so scared of being alone that they'll take anybody who's interested and try and morph into that. And that's what I worry about. So what are some
By the
basic?
way, that's a very valid. That is such a valid point. And it's sad that we are in an environment where we are operate from a place of loneliness.
Yeah.
And then that's almost a place of desperation instead of a place of empowerment. You were about to share something with me. I want to hear
Well, let's see now if I can remember it.
it. Sorry about that. I know
No,
I
no,
did a
no, no.
squirrel on you.
It, oh, what would be baby first steps for our listeners who are going, God, I really like this, but I'm like really afraid to tell him that I want to play with his toes for like a half hour or something. Like what are some, how can somebody ease themselves into the comfort of beginning to have these discussions in your
So
mind?
I bet you. By the way, I have something called intimacy cards. You
Oh,
could, but now these aren't sexual,
okay.
but these are
Okay.
cards to start conversations. So,
Okay.
by the way, there are a gazillion folks. This is by it's called Best Self. I'm not pitching it. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
happened to be
Okay.
what I have. But I think it would start with. I mean, I think if we're going to talk about sexual preferences, we could say, hey, let's play a game together. Let's get to know it. Like you can offer it in a non-confrontational
Love it.
way.
Love it.
Right.
Love it.
Let's write on a piece of paper our wildest kink. I mean, you can make it like try to use humor
Okay.
to
Oh,
get the
perfect.
conversation
Perfect.
started. That might be one way to get the conversation started. Men get a bad rap because we initiate a lot of sexual conversations, and that's because we're primarily driven by our penis. Even us folks that have definitively want a life partner, I'm going to say I'm a guy who wants a life partner, but my lower chakra does a lot of the driving. Um,
Jonathan, you
I'm
are
just going to,
biologically programmed to keep the species going. What we
yeah.
hate you for is what you were built for. So I just, we got to stop with this. That's what
Yeah.
you guys are
Well,
programmed for.
so we kind of like it's dropping a little sexual innuendo, seeing how that plays
Okay.
out. But I guess the point I'm making is let's remove the taboo and make it fun. Let's
Okay.
look at it from a flirtatious perspective. Now, I recognize from a woman's perspective, you don't want to create a misrepresentation of who you are. So I'm a big proponent of that. This is going to require building some trust. And again, I operate from the premise that my clients only meet with men who are very clear about they want a life partner. If a man is
Yeah,
ambiguous in what he wants in
love that.
a relationship, then she's not going to invest in it. Clearly, those men who say, I want a serious relationship, I want to live with someone, I want to get married, or at least have a spiritual marriage. Um, and by the way, for those that are curious about a spiritual marriage, here in the United States, marriage is a contract with the government. It's not a contract with another person. So I'm a big proponent of a spiritual marriage, which is taking the government out of the equation. It's two people making agreements with one another. That's
Jonathan,
just,
you're my bookend. I've been saying this. I went to go, somebody in the early 2000s kept telling me I should be a minister. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh my God, I can't do that. So you can do these things in like 9 months because I know you're able
Yeah,
to.
I'm a minister too.
So I thought, okay, I went in and I said, okay, so far it appears that my claim to fame is that I've had a relationship with a younger guy. Are you sure you want me? And she's like, oh my God, we love you. We're fabulous.
Yeah.
But I just thought, if they put Reverend in front of my name, I thought, I don't even know that I can handle this. So I kind of walked away from it. But I agree with you because I think most people are looking for the juice within that construct. And if you go for the shell, not necessarily, I have girls that are bugging my guys to get married. He could be anyone. They don't care. They just want to check it
Mm,
off the list. And
yeah.
to have a spiritual marriage is a soul contract. And it's
Yeah.
about as pure as you can get. Nobody else is involved. You don't have to pay a lawyer to get out. You don't have to, wait for somebody to free you. I mean, it's about as
Yeah.
clean as they get. So I'm with you on that point.
By the way, I just found out there's this couple that I've known for 10 years and they've been married for 15. And I asked them a question about their marriage. They go, well, we're not legally married. We're in a ketubah, which I guess is a Jewish term for a marriage contract. And
Wow.
when I read it, I mean, my chin dropped. It was the most beautiful agreement. Now, mind you, it's not binding by the government. It's
Right.
it's
Okay.
two people agreeing to it. And
Okay.
I read this and it was the most beautiful expression of love. And I've been, by the way, I've they've called me when they've had some big gigantic fights and I've mediated for them, I
Oh,
mean, as their
that's
dear
so
friend.
beautiful.
And and I'm like, why aren't you two breaking up? Is because we are so committed to this agreement that even when we reach these gigantic bumps in the road, our commitment to one another outweighs our temporary differences. So
Wow.
again, it's a conscious way of approaching a relationship instead of the ambivalent way. So coming back to communication, since we started this conversation, you know what occurs to me, Susan? Most human beings don't really have good role models for healthy emotional communication. And let me let me expand upon this. So most of us kind of in the peripheral scene our parents talk to one another, and as a child you oftentimes just pick up on the disconnect versus the connect.
Okay.
But but for the most part our only indoctrination to healthy couples communication comes from movies and television. That's the majority of where our information comes from,
That's
because it's
terrifying.
rare.
It's
It's
terrifying.
rare that we get, and by the way, those are scripted conversations and they're sound bites. I was watching Goodwill Hunting the other day, and there's this scene where Robin Williams is speaking from the heart. It's so beautiful, and it's 2.5 minutes long. That's it. It's not an hour of him
Yeah.
opening up his heart. It's 2.5 minutes. So
Right.
most human beings don't know what heart-centered communication looks like. It's
Mm.
it's very rare to witness real heart-centered communication. And I think that's what humans are thirsty for, but they don't know how to fill their cup.
That's beautiful. I've got to look up this too. I think this is beautiful. And we do have an enormous communication breakdown. And we see that it's getting worse with the younger generation. So hopefully in the radical honesty, we can start to do this. I love the fact that you suggested to use humor. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I do something fairly similar to what you say. You make it fun. I agree with that 100%. I oftentimes tell my clients to jump to the philosophical, meaning it's not on you. In those initial dates,
Oh,
the what ifs,
yeah.
what do you think about this? And oh, I have a friend who does that. And it's not like they're feel like the bullseye's right on them. Sometimes that's comfortable for people, but I think, the takeaway from this whole conversation is, I think,
Yeah.
is to know yourself, know
Yeah.
what you want, be prepared to fully and transparently share that with another person
Yeah.
and look for the alignment in your goals. And then when those are in place and you're still doing this research, to begin to discuss the finer points, which are how you're going to sexually feel satisfied, what you need and what you want and what you're prepared to do. And to
Yeah.
listen with an open mind,
Yeah.
because you have to know the why it means something to them. I mean, if you get a directive from a person, nobody wants to do that. Like, I need this, this, and this. Nobody wants to do that. That's a job. But
Yeah.
if you could hear your partner say, this makes me feel so fulfilled, so loved, so included, and this is why it's meaningful to me, I might be like, I don't really normally go for that, but if that's the thing I can give, it's a negotiation, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've nailed it. And again, we're just covering the tip of the iceberg here. I mean, we're
I know.
cracking it open. And I invite everybody to read a book called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall
This
Rosenberg.
is like
Um,
a legendary, this book.
yeah, and it should have been titled Compassionate Communication, but the reason why I'm encouraging everyone to either go to his YouTube channel, watch some videos, witness healthy needs-based communication. In other words, what is my need, and advocating for your needs. I believe when humans become more clear on what their needs are and then advocating for their needs in romantic relationship, it's going to alleviate a lot of this frustration. But it's going to require anyone who's watching this, it's
Yeah,
going to require doing the work,
right.
instead of just expecting the other person to be perfect, because that's the way we date. The other person's perfect and my life will be perfect. And that's not how it works.
I know. I know. Love is not always enough.
Yeah.
It's funny. Do you know, when I go into YouTube, one of the top SEOs as I'm doing my videos is make him love me subliminally,
Oh, yeah.
how to manifest love while I sleep. I'm like, talk about, the antithesis, not doing the work. So, Jonathan, this has been a fabulous discussion. We
Yeah.
could go on forever. This is the first of many I would love to have with you. I've kept you for a very long time. You are my first, and therefore you knocked it out of the ballpark. Um,
Uh,
and tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. I know it's in the description, but if they're just listening, tell them how they can get a hold of you. Where do they find you?
Well, certainly. Well, first off, Susan, I am so grateful beyond words to connect with you. So thank you so
Mhm.
much. First off, my name is listed here. I think you'll put my link to my YouTube channel so you can go
Everything,
watch my
everything.
videos. I have a list of links on my YouTube channel, but I'm going to even give you my dating vows. If anyone wants that list that I shared
Wow.
earlier, you
Okay.
can these agreements you can have. I'll certainly include that as well. And then you can find me on Google, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on all the other social media outlets out there. And if this resonates with you, great. I'm honored, but let me just say to you, for those that are watching, Susan, you got one of the best coaches on the planet
Thank you so
helping you in your love life. And I go to her for advice as well. So just so you know, she's
much.
one of my go-to coaches.
It's sweet. And so, everybody, I know you know Jonathan already, but subscribe. That way, he's got a lot of content. He is always on. I see you always on TikTok every day. It's like, how does he do all this stuff? I still don't know. I'm still trying to push buttons. You're brilliant. You're everywhere. I'm going to have all the links. Everybody, thank you for this. This is the first of many conversations that I'm going to have with exciting, dynamic people that I know are going to edify your life with their information. Jonathan, thank you so much. And will you come back and talk to me another time?
I will talk to you every day of the week because I think you're that amazing. If you'll have me, I'm going to give you a big hug of
You too.
appreciation.
You too,
Thank you.
Jonathan. Jonathan Aslay, everybody. Take care.